Hi everyone, welcome back to my Robert Zemeckis series. He's got Flight with Denzel Washington coming out at the beginning of November, so I'm going through all of his films. Today we're talking about Back to the Future, which I just watched again last night. There are some movies that are widely considered to be classics that I haven't seen. Probably the biggest example for me is Gone with the Wind. Never saw it, and don't really have any particular desire to. There are some people perhaps haven't seen Back to the Future and don't have any particular desire to, but I can tell you right now that this is a classic, it is essential, it is a must-see, it is any other thing that that you'd care to classify such an excellent film as. This came out in 1985. I was 12 when this came out, and so I was the perfect age to see it because the main characters were all pretty much in high school. This movie affected me in a way that was different from others. I was, of course, well aware from a young age that Luke Skywalker didn't actually have command of the Force, that he was a guy named Mark Hamill, that Superman was actually a guy named Christopher Reeve and he couldn't really fly, it was all effects. And that E.T. was a puppet. But with Back to the Future, I began to really sort of think about how movies were planned in advance. This is a very, very intricately written movie. I did Romancing the Stone, of course, for the last one. I wasn't that impressed with it. And I looked back at the credits and I realized that makes sense. Bob Zemeckis and his writing partner, Bob Gale, didn't actually write the script for Romancing the Stone. Someone else did. They co-wrote this script, and it shows. It's a very, very tightly constructed film. It involves a 17-year-old who accidentally is sent back to 1955 when his parents were 17 and inadvertently disrupts the meeting that leads to them falling in love, getting married, and having kids. So he has to figure out a way to get them back together and to get them to fall in love with each other, more specifically to get his mother to fall in love with his father, so that he and his older brother and sister will exist in 1985. Otherwise, he's done for. Really, really clever story. And what I noticed upon seeing this like the last time was how some bits of exposition were shoehorned in kind of awkwardly, like the lady who interrupts Michael J. Fox and his girlfriend telling him about the clock tower and how lightning struck it 30 years ago and it hasn't run since, blah, blah, blah. Here's a flyer. Now, that would seem pretty awkward now. It would sort of stick out like a sore thumb. Gee, I wonder if that would be relevant. But here's the thing. Back to the Future is written in a way so that everything is relevant. There are no throwaway lines of dialogue. Every single one of them has meaning. And some of them have double meanings and triple meanings even, depending on who's saying them and what's happened or what's going to happen. There are some films like Skeleton Key, which I love to see a second time, because so much of the dialogue means something different if you know what's coming. And it's kind of similar with this. This isn't a murder mystery or anything like that. Yeah, it's just an incredibly well-written movie. It's exciting and it's really well acted. Michael J. Fox wasn't the first guy to play Marty McFly. Eric Stoltz was cast in this part. But the tone of his performance wasn't quite right. Zemeckis and the other guys making the film, they went, gee, I don't know, he's taking this a little bit too seriously, it needs to be more lighthearted. So even after shooting for a couple weeks, they decided that they needed to let him go and get Michael J. Fox instead. And of course, the movie was so successful that they ended up making another couple of films. Now, after this movie came out, and when it was so successful, they started thinking about making a sequel, and so they added a to be continued at the end of the film, right before the credits start. Well, I'm pleased to report that this disc right here doesn't have the to be continued on it. It has the original version of the film, which goes straight into the credits, which was a nice surprise. They've also got a lot of extras on here. I'm still waiting for the new version of A Clockwork Orange that puts the original Warner Brothers logo on it, because I haven't seen that at all. But yeah, fantastic movie. Leah Thompson, of course, is very beautiful, and we've got this little problem here with her accidentally falling in love with her own son instead of the man that she's supposed to. I mean, who could blame anyone for falling in love with Leah Thompson? But it's an awkward situation for Michael J. Fox, of course. People were somewhat bothered by this. It's a PG-rated movie, but it's pretty risque for a PG-rated movie, I guess. if that kind of thing is on your brain. When I saw this movie, I just thought it was funny. I just thought it was bizarre. But yeah, a lot of I guess some people just thought it was creepy, and it is, I guess, in a way. What am I saying? Of course it is, but it's played for laughs, obviously. But the thing that really kind of stuck with me about this, it's a fun movie, it's exciting, but the thing with Michael J. Fox's character is he's a kid that's already got a lot going for him. He doesn't have the best home life. His parents in the beginning are kind of lame, but he's a well-liked kid. He's good looking. He plays the guitar really well. He's got a beautiful girlfriend. So I didn't relate to him as much as I related to George, who's a bit of a loser and a social misfit. Kind of like how a lot of people really sort of looked up to Han Solo in Star Wars. And I didn't really identify with him because I wasn't much of a rebel. I wasn't a rule breaker. I wasn't a scoundrel like he is. I identified more with Luke because he's the guy, sort of who has done what he was told all his life, and he's looking towards his life meaning something and achieving something great, and learning this incredible skill rather than just being the guy that gets away with as much as he can and tries to make money and keep his nose clean. Or at least have it appear to be clean. So a similar situation here, I kind of identified more with George, the awkward guy who eventually manages to get his act together and win the heart of the girl in the end. I'm just like, yeah, George McFly's my hero. George rules, George McFly's a badass. So yeah, very pleased by that. As I said, Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale, they co-wrote the script like they did with the first two movies. And Alan Silvestri, who's written the score for a lot of different Zemeckis films, wrote the score for this as well. It's a great theme. What else can I say about this? Christopher Lloyd, of course, is the scientist who builds the time machine. And he's got a pretty big part. It's a little odd when you think about it, the fact that this 17-year-odd kid who's got a lot going for him and clearly isn't socially inhibited. One of his best friends is a scientist in like his 60s or something like that. It's odd, and he's an odd character as well. There are a lot of standout scenes in this. Like in other Zemeckis films, such as Used Cars, for example, is a very elaborate opening shot, and the one from this movie is really elaborate as well. Just a camera that tracks all over Doc Brown's laboratory and stops on something and watches it for a while and then keeps moving and then stops on something else. Nice, elaborately choreographed shot. The skateboarding scene in the middle of the movie, that's terrific, and I really like the scene, of course, early on when you have. Here's another example of the pre-planning that went going on, especially at the script stage. Doc asks Marty to show up at 1:15 in the morning, and so periodically he will check his watch or check these clocks to find out how much time has passed, and they must have really sort of worked out exactly how long the sequence needed to be so that you can see the change in the minutes on the clocks at the relevant moment. You see them change from 1:18 to 1:19, from 1:20 to 1:21, what have you, and all that had to be choreographed and timed in such a way so it would be, plausible that exactly that amount of time had elapsed during the sequence. I was sort of impressed with that. I didn't think about it right away, but afterwards I thought, gee, they timed that really well. This was also the first movie in which I spotted a continuity error. I noticed that when Marty was writing a note to Doc at the end of the film, or near the end of the film, he's reading it to himself, but then when you cut to a close-up of the note itself, it says something slightly different. I'm like, oh, it's a continuity error. It's different. But I really started thinking more about how all the characters fit together and how all the actions affected each other and how everything just sort of worked out in this perfect way. And that, of course, is the work of the screenwriters. And, then I started appreciating writing, at least a little bit. I was still big on, stunts and what have you, and visual effects and gags. But yeah, suddenly the writing of film was interesting to me. So Back to the Future, since I saw it when I was at 12 years old, it was a very, very important film, very a big influence for me. And certainly the most important reason why I like Robert Zemeckis as a director. He's made a bunch of other good movies, but this one is like the king for me, just this is the top. I'll be talking about the other two Back to the Future movies later, but the next video I'm going to do, of course, is on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, which came out in 1988 and is a mix of live-action animation, which impressed pretty much everyone who saw it. So I will see you then. That'll be Thursday. Thanks very much for watching. Of course, if you've got thoughts on Back to the Future, leave me a comment, make me a video, whatever. That'd be great. I'm going to do another playlist for Zemeckis like I've done for all the other guys I've done series on. So thanks very much for watching. Take it easy.